It's kind of amazing that here on Cartoon Conspiracy, we're yet to cover one of Disney's most successful shows of all time, as well as one of their more action-oriented and plot-heavy shows that isn't called Gravity Falls. No, because this time we're going to be taking a look at everybody's favorite freelance hero / ordinary teenager, Kim Possible. That said, we're not actually going to be talking about Kim herself today. We're actually going to take a look at one of the more persistent mysteries of the show that was never properly resolved. I mean, sure, there was the odd tease or aside to the viewers, but we were never really given a clear answer. Incidentally, this episode idea was submitted to us in the comments of our Lego Movie episode by YouTube user Mayra Hemmerechts. And I'm so sorry if I just butchered your name. Anyway, in their comment, they wonder what everybody has at one time or another. Why does Dr. Drakken have blue skin? That is a great question, Myra or Mayra. So today, let's explore one of Kim Possible's greatest villains and try to unravel this mystery once and for all. So instead of looking at a particular theory this time around, we're instead going to be taking a look at a couple of possible explanations for why somebody could have blue skin and what this could mean for Dr. Drakken. But before we dive into any of that, let's take a look at what details the show has given us as to why Dr. Drakken is constantly ready for his Blue Man Group audition. And despite the series having lasted 4 seasons and 2 movies, there's remarkably little information here. Firstly, we can be certain that Dr. Drakken's blue skin tone isn't normal since most of the other characters in Kim Possible have traditional human skin tones. This isn't a situation like Doug or The Simpsons where we have, blue people and purple people and green people. We'll get to that. In fact, Drakken is one of very few human characters that seem to possess any sort of abnormal skin discoloration, and it's referenced quite a bit. The only other prominent character to have an irregular skin tone would be Shigo, but her slight green tint is a lot less noticeable than Dr. Drakken's blue meanie thing he's got going on. So we know that Dr. Drakken's blue skin isn't organic, but how did it happen? Well, all jokes and jabs and teases about it aside, let's take a look at what Dr. Drakken himself has to say about it, as he actually briefly discusses this with Professor Dementor during the end credits of the series finale.
New topic, please.
Okay. Why the blue skin?
Glad you asked. Funny story. Not funny, haha, but it was a Tuesday.
Whoa, slow your roll, Doctor. I can only take notes so quickly here. It was... Okay, so obviously that isn't much to go on. All we've learned here is that apparently Tuesdays can't be trusted, which is fair because they're like the 4th best day of the week. They're right in the middle. That's no good. But there is at least one episode where Dr. Drakken's skin color and how it relates to his character plays a significant role. In episode 4 of season 3, Bad Boy, Dr. Drakken and Ron accidentally have their good and evil side switched thanks to a device called the Attitudinator. And as a side effect, Dr. Drakken gradually loses his blue skin and Ron eventually gains that same blue skin that Dr. Drakken usually has. This change would suggest that blue skin would be directly tied to evil in the world of Kim Possible, right? Well, let's put a pin in that idea because we'll be coming back to it soon. One other idea, and probably the most commonly held one, is that Dr. Drakken turned himself blue due to some sort of freak accident, which could also be the origin of the scar underneath his eye. This idea certainly isn't the craziest. Drakken throughout the series has always been a little clumsy in his villainy, both metaphorically and literally, and he's definitely accident-prone, but throughout the series, Drakken doesn't endure any sort of major failures that alter his appearance. Did he learn his lesson once his blue period began? And I mean, come on, Drakken is a mad scientist, so of course some freak accident is gonna turn him blue. This seems like common sense. Or should I say, it would be, if there was no other explanation for blue skin in humans. Okay, so let's unpin this idea that blue skin is directly tied to evil like we see in Bad Boy. If this is the case, how come the majority of villains don't show any sort of drastic change in their skin tone? And again, based on Bad Boy, we can see that Drakken isn't even remotely close to the most evil character on the show. Shigo even blows him out of the water in sheer evil factor, but who's surprised by that? So why then does Ron gain a blue hue to his skin in the episode? Remember, Ron inherited specifically Drakken's evil aside due to the effects of the Attitudinator, which is especially obvious since during the episode, Ron adopts pretty much the exact same MO that Drakken always had when it came to diabolical schemes. Except, you know, slightly more effective because Drakken is kinda dumb. So if we can find out why Drakken has blue skin, we can probably also find out why Ron adopts the same blue skin tone. And based on some small hints in parts of the show, Drakken, much like Ron's initial transformation to blue, seemed to be relatively instantaneous as well. His rap in the episode Rappin' Drakken refers to the incident as one day, and the final line of the series also supports this. Now, here's where this gets weird. Blue skin in humans is actually a thing. It's a real thing that's been documented more than a couple of times. So what are the causes of blue skin in humans? Can we apply any of them to Dr. Drakken's transformation, which apparently happened on a Tuesday? If you've seen our Loud House episode, you'll remember that the pigment in both hair and skin is primarily dependent on the production of melanin, which is what ultimately affects the colors of those things. But what's not as obvious is that there's actually one more big factor that can have a hand in determining skin color, especially when it comes to abnormal skin tones like, oh, I don't know, blue. And it actually comes down to the contents of our bloodstream. One of the most well-known examples of this comes from a hereditary condition from a family in Kentucky known as the Blue Fugates. The members of this family have an incredibly rare blood disease, in which the ferric form of iron, or Fe3, is present in the bloodstream rather than the normal amount of iron that humans possess, which is usually Fe or Fe2. In extreme cases, this can be an absolutely debilitating disease, but healthy individuals with a small amount of this would be able to live relatively normally, other than the blue skin, of course. But what we're going to focus on instead is one of the more common, because there's no way to say that without quotation marks, causes of blue skin. And this is through a medical condition known as Argyria. Argyria may seem like the rantings of a madman, but it's actually a documented condition that can result in skin taking a bluish tinge. And its primary major cause is overexposure to silver compounds or colloidal silver into the bloodstream, whether it's ingested orally, injected, or inhaled. And while silver has many medical uses, it's also used pretty heavily in alternative medicine. And studies have shown that while silver is toxic to humans, small doses aren't too dangerous for us. But the rub is that we have no biological use for silver. So when it enters our system, it manifests itself in certain areas, particularly the skin. And while it's true that silver has a variety of medical uses that can result in mild Argyria as a side effect, there's also the matter of exposure. If you're someone who works closely with silver or silver compounds, you may experience Argyria simply as an occupational hazard. Incidentally, according to a 1991 publication by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the recommended maximum daily dose of silver compounds that a person can be exposed to without experiencing any ill effects is about 5 micrograms. And for reference, 1 drop of water is about 50 micrograms. And the craziest thing in all of this is that conditions like Argyria aren't fatal, or even particularly damaging. Again, unless it's a particularly extreme case. They only seem to provide a decrease in things like kidney function or night vision. Don't get me wrong, still bad side effects, but nowhere near as life-threatening as we might have thought. Other than these things, normal functionality, like Dr. Drakken seems to have, is possible. But keep in mind, we're not talking about particularly serious cases here. Oh yeah, we were talking about Dr. Drakken at one point, weren't we? So where are we with him? Well, as a mad scientist, what's Dr. Drakken's most common MO? More than anything else, Drakken is a genius when it comes to robotics, to the point where he even builds the BBs, a small army of robots, in his attempts to create the perfect woman. Questionable and creepy morals aside, let's examine the BBs here, particularly what they're made of. The most prominent color of their design is this bluish metal that forms their skin, not unlike Drakken's shade of blue. And if you look at silver in the real world, you'll also notice that when you break down silver's color palette through all of the shades of gray, there are also many shades of blue, at least more so than other metals. And finally, if we take a look at the Possible Wiki, only the most trustworthy sources for me, thanks. If we look at the BB's skin color, it also reads silver metal. If Drakken used a heavy amount of silver in what he thought at the time was the perfect creation, it seems fair to think that silver would have been Drakken's general metal of choice. That is, of course, until all his overexposure to silver turned his skin blue. But there is one big problem if we use a condition like Argyria to explain this. While anecdotal evidence suggests it to be a fast transition, the blue skin doesn't seem to happen as instantaneously as we see in Bad Boy. In that episode, how can Ron turn blue when he becomes evil like night and day? Could the Attitudinator have just introduced a whole bunch of silver into Ron's system at once thanks to Dr. Drakken? And what's more, Argyria is an irreversible condition. Once the exposure to silver ceases, the skin will remain the same bluish gray that it was before. So Drakken wouldn't have been able to lose his blue skin, and then once Ron gained it, he wouldn't have been able to lose it either. All that said, there is one more possible explanation for why Dr. Drakken's skin is the way it is. And it's remarkably simple. His circulation could just be garbage. Generally, under-oxygenated blood in humans takes on a slightly bluer tinge, which would in turn affect skin color. And it would be much more noticeable in paler people. And we know that before Drakken became Dr. Drakken, his original self, Drew Lipsky, was a pretty pale dude. But if Drakken had such little oxygen in his system that his circulation would make him look like discount Mr. Freeze, it would pose some huge problems for him. When your skin turns blue due to poor circulation, this is not a case of Argyria. This would mean there's probably a much bigger problem going on. And if it went unchecked, like it seems to be for Drakken, anything could happen, from his lungs becoming severely infected to his heart completely failing. But with all this in mind, let's briefly, for fun, examine the only other prominent human in the show to have an abnormal skin color. Shigo. Canonical backstories aside, can we find any possible cause for the greenish tinge in her skin? Well, as it turns out, an excess of sulfur in the bloodstream can cause a slight green discoloration in both the blood and the skin, much in the same way we just discussed, only with sulfur instead of silver. Maybe when she and her siblings were struck by that rainbow comet that gave them their powers, a large amount of sulfur entered Shigo's bloodstream all at once. Though if this were the case, and ignoring all ill effects of introducing that much sulfur into someone's system at once, her siblings would have to have befallen similar fates with other non-sulfur metals. And also, this kind of condition is usually able to resolve itself through the natural turnover of red blood cells, but in Shigo's case, it very obviously isn't. So eventually, her blood may be completely deprived of oxygen, which would lead to things like gangrenous limbs, which would lead to things like a slow and painful death. But she is a villain who got her superpowers from a big space rock, so let's just chalk this one up to cartoon logic. So we've covered quite a few things today, but since we didn't really venture into this episode with a hypothesis in mind, we aren't really able to give this "why is Dr. Drakken blue" conspiracy any rating. So this week, let us know what you think. Do you think Dr. Drakken's blue skin could be a result of his overexposure to silver? How many Bueno Nacho Knockos out of 5 do you rate our conspiracy? Do you have any other theories to Drakken's blue skin? Sound off in the comments. And thanks again to Mayra or Mayra for suggesting that we tackle this mystery. If you have any conspiracies you'd like us to make an episode about in the future, be sure to let us know. Now, if you'll excuse me, watching old reruns of Kim Possible has made me incredibly hungry for Mexican food, so I'm gonna go indulge in some snackage for the next couple of weeks, probably. Now, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to channel Frederator. And don't forget to ring that little bell icon next to the subscribe button to become part of our notification squad. And remember, Frederator loves you.